finally thought, I should let Joanne know that I really appreciate her work. I've been listening for years.
Yes.
Because I felt like you were somebody that I could really resonate with.
I'm so grateful. And this, to all my listeners out there, is the continuum of a conversation I'm in with the lovely Tully Hall, who reached out to me from this podcast. And we started an online conversation, an email conversation, and I wanted to animate it and bring it to life by meeting you. So welcome, Tully, to the podcast.
Thank you,
I must
Joanne.
ask you where your name came from. I've never heard that name before. It looks like it's got a story with it.
Yeah, old family name. Goes way back on my mother's side. Male, female. It's turned up in a lot of different positions. And then when I was 12 years old and living right outside New York City and already starting to play the French horn, or had been for a couple of years, they built Alice Tully Hall, the music hall in New York City. And then I became a joke and was the joke of many music festivals. And when I got married, my husband said, I wouldn't hear of you taking my name. You can't give up that gimmick. It's too good.
So
So I
kept
always
Tully
look for
for
the flicker. Yes, I kept it. So I look for the flicker of, you're kidding, right?
brilliant. So Tully, one of the things that became a fascination for me in our email conversations was because I studied yoga, the work of Vanda Scaravelli, ostensibly. When I first studied many years ago in the early 90s, we were housed in the Alexander School in London, and we became aware of some of the work. And I've since worked with the Alexander technique, teaching just integrated anatomy and so on. But what I found so fascinating at the time was the gentleness of the approach and how it resonated with the way we approach yoga, restorative yoga. Talk to me about that approach. What drew you to Alexander technique? What inspired you?
Yeah. Alexander technique is so completely inherently respectful
Yeah.
of the being, to meet each person where they are, how they are, and sort of gently invite them into their fuller sensory experience so that they can become much more sensitive to when they're starting to get in their own way, when they're starting to interfere with their fullest, freest volume and balance, and how to just say thank you to the habits. Thank you so much. I know you think you're helping me. We're going to give you this alternative. Just gently refraining from the habits and the harmful, and then getting out of the way, at which point, you're probably familiar with this, Joanne, the right thing starts to do itself. It shows up, and you can say, yes, please come on in. Thank you. And we learn how to, what we call, direct ourselves, which is to really think spatially in such a way that we come to our fullest, freest, most elastic volume. And that's just the body, you know. And as we're not just a body, we're a whole self connected to the world and bioemotional. I love that term of yours. So it's refraining from the unnecessary at any level. So the quieting effect of that to help you get more and more out of the way is just a lifelong journey. So I've probably learned more in the last few years, after 30 plus years of teaching this work, than in the rest of it. So it just never stops.
It's amazing, isn't it? And what I love hearing, because I've had the privilege of working with some Alexander technique groups, teaching integrated anatomy, and the overall thing about the work we do with fascia integrity and bioemotional integrity and so on is this resonance that it feels like such a confirmation, because of course the classical anatomy doesn't make the same sense of the tissue that the understanding fascial matrix does. And this awareness of our sensory self-regulation, self-management, so on and so on. I'm sure we can talk about that for hours.
Yeah.
But what I love is I've got this sense that this confirms what you've been doing forever.
Yes.
It's fascinating, you know, with anyone I've spoken to who studied with Moshe Feldenkrais, and one of my teachers was Tom Myers, and he knew him. And this wisdom, Ida Rolf was obviously the lineage of my Bodywork, and there was this incredibly gentle, very powerful wisdom that they wanted to bring the being back into the body and reunite this false separation that we've inherited anatomically of studying the body as if it can be separated. And what fascinates me is that when I talk to somebody like you who's spent decades doing this kind of work, and I bow to you, is this, it's almost like you find yourself saying yes, exactly, because you actually already know that.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. Well, when I first became a fan of yours, Joanne, which is when I heard you on Liberated Body, Brooke Thomas's lovely podcast.
Yeah.
She's gone on her own journey, which has been amazing to watch. And it was the How We Form and Move. And I geeked out, probably droned on till my students were sick of hearing about it, because you're talking about the embryology and just the whole amazing journey of it. And I'd already been thinking, my gosh, as a bit based on a lot of my experiences, including that injury blog I sent you, we're made for glide, we're made for spring, we're an ocean. How can we inhabit that most fully and freely? And we're never going to know the whole of it, but we can just keep kind of honoring it. So I've followed you because I keep hearing, oh yes, oh yes, confirmation, especially with the whole fascia integrity. Yes. Yes.
Well,
It
I mean, it's all
confirms.
about the elastic recoil. And
Yeah.
this is where we're in a difficulty, Tully. And I'm so thrilled that you've accepted the invitation to talk to us, because I want to respect, I mean, I love that you're a fan. I mean, I'm deeply flattered, but what I want to respect is the fact that you wouldn't have loved it if it wasn't resonating with something that was already there, something that you already knew intuitively. And I like to think that I maybe join the dots. I'm not a formal scientist, scientific researcher as such. My specialty is spiritual science. But what I came from was, how do we as spirits animate this form? Where did we find this idea that there's levers in the body? Because, you know, my father was an engineer and he was just like, what? That doesn't make sense. How's it lever? It's round. It doesn't make one plane with a pin. You know, it was like, Dad, you know, I was looking at him like, bless his heart. And it wasn't that at all. You know, he was an engineer. He was a fighter pilot in his day, you know, Top Gun when he was in his 80s. He didn't look like that, but he still flew his Harvard when we took him out on a special flight. And I mean, we all just had our mouths open because he knew what he was doing. Aerobatics in his 80s. I mean, oh my goodness. And you suddenly saw this incredible understanding of motion, of engineering, of structure, of integrated elements that all had to come together, because those planes didn't do it for the pilots. The pilots had to work every single detail. And it was like it was in his bones. And he'd just look at me and he'd go, how can there be levers in nonlinear biologic forms?
I love it. And that's from an engineer.
And I'm like, well, there aren't any. And of course, my son went on to study exercise science. And he's got a master's in it. And he stands and argues with me about biomechanics. I just look at him and I go, sweetheart, it doesn't make sense to me. Now, I'm not making it wrong. It just needs to be updated. But when you and I talk about updating our work, to what? To an anatomy that makes sense in the sense of an atlas telling us what's where, but not biomechanics that makes sense of what we see. And that brings me to bring up what you said at the beginning. When you're working with a habitual pattern in someone, how many aspects of that being do you have to address?
I certainly have to be aware of all of them and know that there's going to be a lot that I am not aware of. So I feel like I'm asking questions all the time. I'm asking with my hands, I'm watching, I'm asking questions of, you know, the person who can speak to me, and just listening, trying to be respectful and try to sense if I'm starting to impose in a way that they won't be able to receive it. It won't make sense. So how can I invite without imposing? So I'm always trying to listen to all the levels, and the longer I do this, the humbler I get. Like,
Yeah.
I haven't lived in this body, and then having gone through some injuries and surgeries myself, boy, does that give you, as you said,
Yeah.
that
Thank
gives
you.
you the empathy to know that you cannot possibly know. So we can just issue the invitations, but we can't dictate anything to anybody. That includes me to me.
I know, however much you wish. But, I find this fascinating because in spiritual science, we address the physical, the astral, meaning the imagination, the causal, meaning the emotional, the mental, the etheric, and then we get to soul. They have different qualities, each sheath of beingness, as it were. And from what you're saying, then you address all of those. So you might work wordlessly, you might work using your hands, you talk to the person and hear their emotional response, yet you wouldn't call it a psychology session. But there's this, presumably there's an element of talk therapy, if you want to call it that, within the work, even though it's somatically based. Is that can I say that?
Yeah, well, it's funny because I've heard you say that, you're talking to manual therapists and movement educators, and Alexander teachers are like, but we're just teachers. We happen to use our hands. So it's sort of the whole
It's both, isn't it?
package, right? Is
Yeah.
very much both, and you don't know how you're going to get the most traction, and that's, well, we've always tended to be very um it was hard for a lot of us to go on Zoom during the pandemic because we felt the hands-on was so critical to giving an experience that would be outside of the habitual realm,
Yeah.
that would kind of wake things up and give somebody a new vista of possibilities of how they could balance and breathe and move and react and function. But ultimately, Alexander didn't have anybody putting hands on him. He stood in front of mirrors and watched himself, and he figured it out. So a lot of
Wow.
us discovered on Zoom that, yes, of course you can talk to the person, and they can take responsibility for putting it through their own nervous system, and they can learn a heck of a lot. And for some people, it may even be better. I think for
Really,
a lot
that's fascinating.
yeah. Yeah. So there are some dedicated, only online Alexander teachers who that is the way they prefer. And then I think there's a bunch of us who maybe do a hybrid now since the pandemic. I still do and enjoy my Zoom teaching, but it was so happy to get back in person, getting hands on people. And I think for a whole lot of people that is far and away the best thing. But I will never say never. We all learn differently. And I've just learned to be less and less categorical. The longer I do this, there's lots of ways in. So they're all good. And I love the people that actually do both my Zoom classes and do in-person lessons, because then I can teach more just educational content. I can do share screens, we can do games, and they can make a lot of discoveries on their own. And that's the most important part of Alexander, is not what we do in the room with them, it's what they learn on their own. Oh my gosh, I went away and I noticed that every time X happens, I do Y. And they come in and tell me that. I'm like, this is so fabulous, wonderful, wonderful.
I just admire you so much because I know, um, you know, my spiritual teacher was absolutely an amazing man. He's not with us in the physical anymore. And whenever you asked him what he was doing, he'd say, I'm just working on my habits.
Yes. Forever. Amen.
Forever, amen. I love that. So tell me, Tully, the burning question about the French horn. You mentioned the French horn earlier.
Yeah.
And I'm intrigued to know, A, if you still play it, and B, if not, do you play other music?
Yeah. I probably got going with French horn at age 10 or something like that, and played it professionally for many years, including right up through the first bunch of years of my Alexander teaching, and love the instrument. It's notoriously challenging and wonderful, and the wild beast of the orchestra. um, I will always be very heart connected to it, but I stopped playing at a certain point because I was freelancing and teaching Alexander, and I hit a point where I really had to ask myself in all honesty if I was really enjoying the gigs, really. Because often the freelancer's life is that you have a low and then suddenly you have something that's a real tightrope walk. Um, the kind of piece where if you do a great job, nobody really particularly notices. They might notice a little, but if you don't do a great job, everybody knows because it's a very exposed. So, and that really wasn't even the reason. I just thought, I'm going to take a sabbatical and see what my true connection is to music and the instrument. And when I walked away, I found that what I missed was the people and the music and the experience of ensemble playing. I didn't miss the physical horn so much. So I kind of extended the sabbatical and thought I'll just reinvent in other ways. And I went into other forms of music, um, and then got very reconnected to the piano, which has been my very good friend. And I've been paddling around with vocal work lately in a very beautiful, innocent, exploratory way with a very gifted colleague. And that's just opened up a whole new avenue and helped me to address some of the tensions from the French horn that I never felt I could successfully address. So I feel like if I keep going in this avenue, maybe the day will come like I still have the French horn, I'm just going to pick it up again. And with all the wisdom that I've acquired in the meantime. So who knows, Joanne? I'll keep you posted.
I'm so intrigued because the work I do now, my own practice is Surat Shabda Yoga, which is the yoga of the sound current. And we use sound and sounding a great deal in the practice to calm the nerves, to manage anxiety, to prepare for meditation and prayer, and all kinds of really using that resonance field. And I wanted to ask you two questions. One was, did you find that musicians, this I'm intrigued to know, did you find that musicians really benefit from Alexander techniques? I bet the answer is yes to that, because they get stuck in positions, and there must be a story in there about that. And then the other thing is, do you find that using sound well, you've said it helps you. Do you ever use that with your clients? Is that appropriate, or is that outside of Alexander so far?
I'd say anything goes in a lesson, pretty much if it will help the purpose, if it will help whatever we need. Yeah, I think vibration, I think we are vibration ultimately. That's what we are. And I think it's beautiful that you use it. I'd love to know more about how you're using it. Musicians are, it's Alexander technique is such a godsend to all performing artists. I particularly get musicians. I get the head trips. I've been there. I know the whole shebang. I know the joys. I know the sorrows and the pitfalls. So yes, tremendously helpful because if you carry your instrument as part of your body, as singers do, obviously you have to get the whole macro system in as much balance as possible so that this delicate, beautiful microsystem of the vocal organism, which is so delicate, can have its maximum suspension and freedom. But then there's all the instruments, all of which impose all kinds of weird stresses and strains. So I got pretty good scoliosis. I've always tended to blame the French horn. I don't know if the poor thing deserves all the blame, but definitely when I did my Alexander training, I came out of 25 years of a horn twist down, crunch down, and a lot of that kind of built my curvature, which is better than it used to be, but it means that I'm always in a negotiation with gravity, always. So as I joke with my acupuncturist, it's an ongoing negotiation, and we're always at the table negotiating.
It's just brilliant.
So everything helps. So yeah, the French horn twists down, the violin twists you down. A lot of them put
Yeah.
weird rates on the body, and then you're there for hours and hours and hours at a time.
Absolutely.
So to learn to just to recognize what the tendencies are, and then to realize what it would mean to come into fuller volume, and then to take that fuller volume to actually dealing with this weight of the instrument and the stress of playing and performing and learning music. And, it's endless. But it is true that just making sound with your own body or your own body via an amplification, an instrument, it's the best thing in the world. It's
Just but you see, this to me is fascia integrity written large. It
yes.
brought me to a story. I must share this with you because I think it might make you laugh. I had the most wonderful friend of mine. I adore him, an anatomy professor. And we were both at a teaching venue and we started chatting about what we do. And he said to me, "Can I ask you something?" And I said, "Of course." And he said, "Do you suppose you could work with me to be able to jump out of a swimming pool?" And I said, "What do you mean? Why would you want to jump out of a swimming pool?" He said, "Well, swimming is my favorite thing. It calms me down. I work very, very hard. I work very long hours. I spend a lot of time looking down a microscope." He was an embryology specialist within anatomy. And of course, I learned a lot of my embryology from him. Lucky me. But he came to me for a session because he had this back issue. And when it came to getting out the pool, he had to climb out the steps and he wanted to be able to bounce. And he said, I just feel like I've lost my bounce. And I have to tell you, I was absolutely terrified of body reading an anatomy professor because I'm not being funny. I was thinking, oh my God, am I going to remember the names of everything? And what if he asks me about something really technical and I can't remember which joint it is or which muscle or whatever? And that was so funny. Anyway, he stood there and I body read him and all I saw was the missing instrument. He was a musician. And he had an instrument that requires that shape. And what it was for me looking at him, because obviously I've been body reading for a long time, what I saw was this, and I love the fact that you use the word volume. You give people their volume back because, of course, volume is music. Sound and volume are what we do. And our bodies are strung like instruments.
Right.
And when you look at someone with their whole energy field, all I could see, and I couldn't not see it, wasn't, but let's say it was a French horn. I saw you. It would be like looking at you and saying, "Where's the French horn?" Like it was a photograph where someone had taken a photograph of you playing, and then just rubbed out the instrument and colored you in. It was almost like, "Where is it?" And I just stood there and he looked at me and he said, he was teasing me and he said, "Okay, Doc, what's up?" And let's say it was a violin. It wasn't, but I said, "You've got violinitis." And he went, "Sorry?" I was like, oh my God, I have flown it now. And I remember blushing to the roots of my hair and just putting my head in my hand and going, "I'm really sorry. That's not very technical, is it?" And he just was dumbstruck and he just went, "Well, that's a first." Because he deals with professors and doctors and medical students all day long. And I was standing there saying, "You've got violinitis or whatever." "What do you mean?" And I said, "Well, it's just missing from your posture. And do you still play or can I undo it?" That's what our sequence will be about. And he said, "No, I don't play anymore." And I said, "Well, okay, if your goal now is to jump out of a swimming pool, let's see if we can restore you." Because it was as if when we touch someone on a bodywork table, we become one, or we touch someone on a mat, go to somebody, we become a joined creature. Our geometries join.
The steamer.
Yeah. And when you hold an instrument, as you've so beautifully described, you become one with it. You adjust your weight, you adjust your balance, you adjust your organization. And as you said, fascia is the tissue of temporality in the body, to quote John Sharkey. And I've seen this over and over and over again. And for me, that was such a powerful distinction because it's obvious that when we repeatedly, over and over and over and over again, practice variability, we demonstrate variability. And when we practice a posture that doesn't move very much, but has a profound holding pattern in it, what you've articulated is exactly what I saw on that occasion. And then it's a question of how can we animate the body to undo it just enough? And we did. We were jumping out the swimming pool. And I had help. It wasn't that simple. And I don't want to make it sound like I did it because, as you know, the client has to really want to do it and do a lot of work. But it was musicianitis, which is a thing. And it's like it's no good looking at someone and saying, oh dear, you've got an occupational hazard. If that's how they're making their living, how can we enhance the situation so that you're kind of training while you're practicing rather than
Yeah. And of course, the huge
training?
benefit for musicians is not only can they bring a much kinder approach for their own system that's supporting the instrument, but their music will get so much better. You get so much freer than whatever the musician in you has to say is saying, thank you, now I can come out. I'm unfettered. You've set me free.
Brilliant.
Yeah, and that's really that's the main thing. But another interesting thing about vibration, because I will sometimes, well, if somebody's a singer or an instrumentalist, yeah, we'll play, we'll sing, or we'll hum or do something to make sound, and the vibration through the body. I'll actually, this is not Alexander technique, but sometimes in my lie down classes, I'll have people generate a little chi by rubbing their hands, lay it over the eyes,
Yeah.
and do humming with
Mhm.
their tongue in different locations to stimulate the meridians, because it profoundly talks to that whole system that you're always so beautifully describing. The whole connected oneness of us resonates with it, and it's tremendously calming and somehow connecting. So I I sent you my blog about recovering from the injury and
Yeah, I was
having
going
the
to ask you about
experience.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, well, interestingly, I'm happy to say whatever you want me to
Go
say
ahead.
about it.
Yeah,
But,
please.
okay, well, I did have and this was years ago. I've had other things happen since then. This was having a knife go through my left hand all the way through it. And this was, of course, horrifically terrifying to a hands-on worker and a musician who uses hands. Um, so it was so shocking. It kind of profoundly shocked me into a different place,
Yeah.
which proved to be a very wonderful place of learning and growth and just development. But I was lucky that it was an injury to my hand. So the day after my injury, I was able to, right away, I was using my Alexander even in the emergency room. But the day after the injury, I went slowly through my very long Tai Chi practice that I had at the time, a long form, 150 postures. So it took a while and got way into it. And something started happening. I started shaking and my breath was really strong. And I really thought I was having a nervous breakdown. I thought, oh my gosh, I'm falling apart. What is this? What's going on? And then this other little intelligence said, it's okay. It's okay. Just go with it. If you can keep going, keep going. Just let it do its thing. And I just kept shaking and breathing hard, and then it started to feel like my hand started to sparkle, and that this sort of shimmer started to open around the injured hand. And I thought, what the, but I just kept going. And I got all the way through the form, shaking and breathing, and my eyes closed actually. And to do, anybody that does Tai Chi knows to do your form with your eyes closed means you better have pretty good balance. But something was working through me. And then I lay on the floor and just shook like a leaf and just felt stuff just pour through me, drain out of me, and had just this profound wave of gratitude for all my teachers, everything I'd learned. I knew I would heal perfectly. And I got up and I just felt amazing, like I'd had the best Alexander lesson of all time. And then I was able to start healing, but I could tell that what went out of me was the literal shock of the impact of the knife going through. That's what left. The trauma, that an instant boom trauma left. And then I could just get on with healing, which of course took quite a while.
Yeah.
And this many years later, finally my finger isn't so numb and is fully functional. And I use the piano as my PT. But subsequently to that, I learned a meditation technique that's a chi-based meditation where you're directing through the microcosmic orbit, you're directing chi through the nervous system. And it's one of these brilliant things where you have to agree that you will do phase one every day for 100 days. And if you miss a day, you have to go all the way back to day one. So I was very good and I didn't miss any days. And it got into the third phase of it. And this shaking started to happen again. I'd be doing the meditation and I'd start shaking. It was like, oh, I recognize this. Something's trying to move. The blocks are trying to go. Oh, cool. Just let it go. Oh, do your thing. But I noticed later on in experimenting that if I would start humming, the shaking would immediately stop. Oh, we're going into that expression. You don't need to shake now. You're vibrating in that way. So fine. So it's just I don't even know what that's about.
Well, one of the things that we do know, I mean, Leon Chaitow wrote a beautiful piece called "Humming My Way Back Home," and it's a lovely little article, a blog article on, I think, his website. I think if you just look up Leon Chaitow, "Humming My Way Back Home," he talks about humming and the effect that it has on the nervous system, but from a very literal way of thinking of it, the alar fascia and all of the fascia of the throat and the vocal cords, it's a strong instrument. I mean, Leonardo da Vinci used the esophagus and the larynx and the pharynx to design a musical instrument, a wooden wind instrument based on human physiology. Absolutely extraordinary, his work. But what he honored was the geometry of the form. That's what he understood, because he was trained out of the work of Vitruvius, and that's how Leonardo da Vinci's Vitruvian Man. It was the answer to a riddle that Vitruvius set.
Mhm.
And the interesting thing about the humming is that it literally vibrates back to vibration and resonance. It vibrates the vocal cords and the fascia of the throat and neck, but also the vagus nerve is in there, folded in there very exquisitely and extraordinarily. All the cranial nerves are, in fact. And of course, that goes straight to the heart and straight to the gut. And so it calms the entire sympathetic nervous system down into parasympathetic. And I often, because I've spent so many years now in doing, as I said, Surat Shabda Yoga, and I do so much chanting and toning, and the effect that it has on a group or an individual is really extraordinary. And I'm sure that the science is following to research why that is. And research always depends on the question that we ask. But from a point of view of fascia integrity, it's absolutely like, of course, if you scream and shout at people all the time and you're constantly pushing, there's a resonance that is spiky and hard and difficult to maintain and outgoing. And when you're humming, there's something about coming back inside and finding stillness, and whatever the technical story of it is, there's a self-soothe shift, isn't there, in a habitual concern. And I really admire you listening in that way to yourself, and that fabulous work, releasing something that needed healing, just letting it go and not being afraid of the somatic response. That's just so inspiring.
Well, I think it's, everything I'd done up to that point gave me enough of a tap on the shoulder that, no, don't be afraid. This is good. Let it happen. Let it happen. And I've just found that sort of resonant plays out in all of life. But what you were just saying about screaming and shouting all day, pressure, that's so much of the culture that we're surrounded in now is push, try harder, try again, more effort. And that's just the water we swim in. It's so normal. So that when people are coming into, my teaching studio, or just watching myself go into pushy mode all the time, every day, I'm constantly, oh, wait a minute. Oh, no, don't need, thank you, but no. That's what we learn to do. It's programmed right into us. So we're always trying to sort of gentle ourselves out of that so that we can get out of the way and undo and find the release that'll let us find the connection to gravity. And one of our wonderful Alexander Technique scientists who are bravely trying to measure, how does Alexander Technique work? How does this stuff work? And they've done some beautiful stuff. And what they've been able to say definitely so far is that it definitely improves the distribution and the adaptability of
Yes.
postural tone and
Yes.
improves the body schema to a finer and finer detail. And that, I mean, that's absolutely true and wonderful. And that's one of the side effects of Alexandra, is that's what it works. But that's what gives you access to your subtler sense of yourself, so that you can go into these more sort of ethereal realms. Is why I call Alexandra technique my portal to all other
Absolutely.
things.
Yeah, I can
And I
absolutely.
can explore, because no thing will solve everything. Alexander technique ain't going to fix everything. Just nothing's going to fix everything. But it gives me this wonderful entrance that I love gyrotonics. So it gave me this wonderful, entrance into that world, or into dance, or better entrance into music. Or I heard you interview Sue Hitzmans. We're like, oh, melt method. That looks interesting.
Exactly.
Paddling around in that world, and holy cow, is that interesting for the scoliotic person? My
Oh,
gosh.
yes. Oh, yes. Sue is brilliant. And, this is what I love, because when you say that, the segue, because I see it all like a web, and I just think, let's all go down all the different spokes and find out what's right for us. And what I love about what you're saying, because we need to be outside, we need to go out there and get, push ourselves towards a goal. That's great, but it's not the only way, because we need to counterbalance that by gently pulling in and going back inside and finding that inner sanctuary. And, it's not an easy thing. I've been consciously and conscientiously trained for years, and I mean years, in paying attention to that inner place that isn't anywhere. You can't define it. And it's not just a selfish internal, what do I want? It's nothing to do with that kind of brat speak entitlement. Well, I've been praying for a week for a new car and it still hasn't come. It's not, God the bellhop in the sky that gives you what you ask for if you use the secret methods properly or something like this. Is apart from that. It's this place where I think you've alluded to it really beautifully, Tully, that when you injured your hand, you started using your techniques immediately to calm yourself, to get yourself to the emergency room, to go through that process. But then you surrendered to something beyond what you knew. That's what was so beautiful about that story, that you surrendered to something that outside of your knowing, and you said to yourself, how shall we do this? And whether you call it your high self or source or God or the universe or whatever name we give this thing that we pay attention to, I think you'll agree with me when I say that for myself, the learning to pay attention to what's going on inside. I mean, like you, I had to have a diagnosis 18 months ago that nobody wants. And it was like an oncoming train. And it was like, stop pushing, get off this track. You're not listening. I had at that point 7 different major trauma losses, every 6 months for the previous few years. And this was like the 7th. And one of my friends said, why don't you consider it your 7th alchemy? It's the one that caused the transformation. And I just stopped. I had to stop and go inside, but go inside in a whole other way and give myself time to be. I don't know if it's worked. So far, so good. But the shift in not pushing, in watching things unfold in front of me without feeling the need to fix or somehow put it right, and I wanted to ask you about this because I think it's something that as therapists, a lot of us practitioners, whatever it is that you do, we come from this service. We come from a profound sense of service, making a difference to others. And it's so easy to get caught up in trying to fix people. It's one of the reasons I love Sue Hitzman so much, because she developed MELT to help people help themselves with an overt mission to train them to do that. And I've got a lot of time for Sue. There's a magic in MELT. There really is. And what I wanted to ask you, though, is where do you find yourself when you're working with somebody holding back from fixing? Or do you?
All the time. I have to watch. Oh, you're walking up to the line here. Mm-mm.
How do you know, though? How do you sense that you're getting too helpful or?
Yeah. Well, the Alexander training is so exquisite, and for such a long time, you're learning to work with yourself to get yourself to the fullest, freest volume, so that's what you're putting when you put your hands on. That's what you're bringing to the person. So you're literally giving an invitation from yourself, right, from your feet on the ground, from your dance with gravity, working with them, both so that I can feel what they're doing and I can look after myself, because the second I start working too hard, I'm sending the wrong signal. I'm starting to interfere with them because I'm interfering with myself. It's very humbling work, Joanne.
Oh,
So
I
you're
know.
constantly having to check yourself of I'm just asking questions. What's here? Oh, okay. Okay, what's available? Oh, little more is available. Okay, let's see if we go a little. Would you like to come this way? Okay, this much, but no more. That's fine. And you're always honoring their system's ability to process it, and very much the conscious intelligence, because that's what we're speaking to all the time as we're trying to kind of awaken that conscious awareness that will start to inform them more about what's going on with them, their own habits, and, in particular. And I always say, celebrate your habits. Every time you notice it, woo, that's fantastic. Now you have some choice. It doesn't mean you can dismantle it on the spot. I'm still working on an awful lot of mine, and I will for the rest of my life. But yeah, it's just always this respectful, invitational process. And nothing thrills me more, this probably happens to you too, is when my students will quote me back to me, something I said a while back that I've forgotten about, and they'll say it to me unfailingly right when I need to hear it. And I'll say,
Oh,
oh, thank
yeah.
you. Yes, that's right.
I really learned about that feature, that what you're talking about when I was watching the documentary about Charlie Mackesy, who wrote The Boy, The Mole, The Fox and the Horse.
Oh, yeah.
And it's such a beautiful, delightful piece. And he was interviewed and saying how excited he was when other people, like children, particularly in nursery schools, did their own versions of his work and sent it to him with new messages. And I thought, wow, that is so generous. And I say that to you too, Tully. I think you have to be more than respectful. I think you have to be very, very generous. You can't do that if you're the kind of practitioner that wants to take credit for the difference that's made to the client. Or, I mean, we have to own what we do. We have to be responsible about what we do. And that comes with, oh, great, good job. You can say that. That's part of your self-management. Otherwise, we live in a low self-esteem place and you're passing that on to your client. So we do have to be able to acknowledge ourselves as, okay, that was pretty good work and I could have done better and maybe I could have done this. But we have to be able, I think, to draw the line at beating ourselves up because we can't fix someone. And we are working with them, for them.
Yeah.
And sometimes you get a client who thinks it's up to you to fix them. And then we have to not work that way either. It's tricky. But what I notice is that there's a generosity of spirit that you obviously have, that you give away that technique, that moment with the client, that magical interaction, that they get to go and grow with whatever it is. And as you said at the beginning, that nothing's more exciting than when they come back and they got it for themselves and develop something that was way beyond what you could have done.
Oh, I always feel like, oh, look what happened! Isn't that amazing? How did that happen?
Yeah.
Yeah, we're having a collaboration. It's very much, I can't do it on my own.
Well, exactly. And that's the essence of fascia integrity, that the body works with the tension compression system. And when tension compression unite, the emergent property is volume.
Yeah.
And so the essence of an emergent property is something, the sum of the parts is not just greater than the individual aspects, but the individual aspects can't necessarily do what emerges from their collaboration
Yes, yes, yes. And then we have glide, we have spring, we have volume.
out of
Yeah.
the interaction. Yeah, magical. Tully, I just wish I lived near you. Where are you in America?
I'm in the Twin Cities of Minnesota, so the upper Midwest. I'm just east of St. Paul.
How utterly wonderful. But now I know that you're on Zoom. I've no excuse. I have to come to it. And I just want to
I
thank
know
you
it.
so much for your time and the wonderful, wonderful story that you've
Well,
woven.
thank you, Joanne. You're just as wonderful to be with in person as I figured you'd be.
Oh,
And I am loving your book. Have to go slowly because it is so rich and dense. And I think I wrote to you, the embryology chapter kept exploding my brain. And I like, oh, but the whole in the round thing, I was
we're
saying to my
down.
colleague, and we start in the round, we stay in the round. And she like thought for a minute, "Ooh, huh?" Of course, of course.
Listen, Tully, one of the frustrations of my life is that when I get something to a point that I can really get it, I have to simplify it down, not dumb it down. I have to go through all the difficulty, all the studies, I drive myself nuts. And then I come out the other end and then I go, oh, of course, we're round. We're round. And when you say that, you absolutely have to give it away because anybody can say that. You can't copyright that. You can't be famous for saying that. You can't, even the word bioemotional. I had a wonderful conversation with John Sharkey about this. And he said to me, you've put it in the book, give it away. And I was like, yeah, but it doesn't exist in the English dictionary. What if somebody gives me a hard time? And he said, don't worry about it. They'll be using that word. It works. Bioemotional. We are bioemotional. We are biological, living, emotional, in motion, emotional, energy in motion beings, animating our bodies. That's what we are. If we're alive, we're bioemotional. Doesn't replace biomechanics, but it makes much more sense.
Yes.
And he
yes.
said, just give it away. And I was like, because there's a part of me that wants credit for it. I coined this term. And then I said, oh, for God's sake, I just want everybody to use it because if it allows everybody to really feel permission for their whatever their anatomy and physiology is to be alive and well and vibrant and resonant and in motion with joy to whatever extent they have, then go for it. Enjoy.
Well, I credit you for it, Joanne.
Oh, John.
Because you're the first one I heard say it. I'm like, oh yes.
Well, I just love that you've taken it up, and I there's another one as well that my embryology professor gave me permission because I made up a lot of words in that first book, and he went berserk. He read a lot of it. Said, no, you can't make it up. And Jaap van der Waal has still called me to the next edition. I can raise the game on that embryology, but of course, we can always raise our game. But the other word is spatialization. That we're not just about specialization, we're also about spatialization. That is my one of my keys is the in between. And I've read in many authoritative books that the somites of the embryo form vertebrae, and they don't. They form the lower half of the upper vertebrae, the disc, and the upper half of the subjacent one, the one underneath. So that means they're spatializers, and they're more interested in the shape and space allowed for the disc and the foramen that the nerves are going to exit. So the somites have far more to do with space organization and pattern of what's not there, of what's not going to be bone in the spine. That
I just read that. There's so much like, what?
Exactly.
Yeah, the spatialization I resonate with so much because we talk about thinking spatially. That's how we direct ourselves. We think spatially, and that's where all the magic happens. Even with a brand new Alexander student, if you ask them to think in what I would call a spatial way, they'll change right under your hands in 30 seconds.
I could absolutely. And that I think is because you're animating the proprioceptive sense, which of course is the fascial matrix responds immediately. And it accounts for what we feel we're doing as much as what we think we're doing and what we know we're doing. It's right in there in that, for me, that interface between how spirit, the etheric, the non-tangible, the metaphysical animates the physical form. I think fascia is the interface. And
Yes.
it just
I've
makes
been-
perfect sense to me. Literally.
Yeah.
It's our sense-making equipment or fabric or whatever. And this is where the anatomists and the physiologists and the biomechanists and the scientists, they're really having genuine issues with A, how fascia should be defined, and B, whether it should be a unit or a system, and C, whether the word fascia is even the right word, because it's inherited from architecture. And the new science of body architecture does not include levers or flat planes or straight lines or any linear reductionist. It just doesn't, it's not what it's round.
Well, may I ask you, since I just listened to your interview with Neil Teese, is that how you
Yes.
pronounce it?
Peace. Yeah, Neil.
Teese, Mr. Interstitium, right?
Mr. I adore him.
Yeah, I loved what he said about just how we're connected to everything, to really are of the planet. I love that. But so interstitium and fascia,
Same. It is fascia.
it's the same thing. It's just
Well,
this
is
is
here.
the spaces.
Well, this is really hard. There's no real spaces in the body in the empty
That's
sense.
right.
They're virtual, but the interstitium is basically the in-between.
The
And the
in-between.
fascia is the in-between. And the in-between unites everything with everything else.
Okay.
So I was working with Neil in November, and we were being shown, I won't go into the whole story because we'll do it in another podcast, but we were basically being shown a particular type of transplant. And Neil was able to tell that the transplant had been accepted because the interstitium of the transplant and the mammal it was transplanted into united through the tissue of the transplant. And it was the acceptance of the interstitium that showed him as a pathologist. You know, he's a Buddhist liver pathologist. Absolutely unbelievable combination of a whole lot of things. Very, very dear to me, Neil. And he's explained that he's just come out. His book is out, I think, or it's coming out in May, on notes on complexity theory.
Okay.
Oh my God, you have to read it. He's just brilliant. And to witness him working with another scientist who was a biochemical engineer and Neil working together, oh my God. And what Neil's now doing is looking at a lot of different organs, not just the liver, and seeing that, in fact, the interstitium unites everything in the whole body, which correlates with some other research that was done years ago about an invisible meridian system that isn't the Chinese meridians, is another system, and it suggests that it was all the interstitium. And it was Neil that said to me, it's all fascia, including the dermis.
Yes.
And I'm quoting him on that. I'm quoting you on that, Neil Thies, because it's like, how can it not be? It's just a thicker version of the skin of an organ. It's a different quality, and fascia is different in its many multiple expressions, and that's the difficulty. No one can nail it. But I think it's the interface.
Yeah.
It's the interface of spirit animating the pattern of matter. And the pattern of matter is basically, pattern comes from pater and matter comes from mater, and it's the father mother of the anima animus that we self-organize in utero.
Yeah.
So it's a very spiritual thing.
When you said you were kind of getting off of the self-assembling, or maybe it was Jaap van der Waal that said maybe not assembling. And so I've just started calling it self-weaving because I heard you use that. And I love that. That's
We
very
do. We ourselves. Yeah. And I thank you. I thank you for joining me and sharing the weave of your story and the music in your life together, because I think they can't do anything but go far.
Well, thank you, Joanne, and thank you so much for just all the many worlds you've invited me into, and I hope to go further into.
Well, thank you for
Stay
joining.
with you.
Oh, please. Thank you. Thank you so much, Tully.
Thank you.